the 21st of August, 1986, a quiet night in the hills of northwestern Cameroon suddenly turned into one of the strangest natural disasters ever recorded. Nearly 2,000 people died, yet there was no explosion, no earthquake, and no visible storm destroying the villages. The lake above them simply released a massive breath of invisible gas, and the air itself became deadly. High in the mountains sat a small crater lake known as Lake Nyos. It rested inside the bowl of an ancient volcano, more than 3,000 feet above sea level. Around the lake stood steep crater walls, like a giant stone cup carved into the mountain. The villages below were scattered through narrow valleys where farmers had lived for generations, growing crops and raising cattle on what they believed was safe and fertile land. The geography of the region created a natural trap. The lake sat at the highest point, while the villages stretched along tight valleys that sloped downward like long corridors. If anything heavy ever flowed out of the lake, those valleys would guide it directly into the homes of the people living below. But the real danger was hidden, deep beneath the surface of the lake. For decades, carbon dioxide gas had been slowly leaking upward from magma deep underground. That gas dissolved into the cold water at the bottom of the lake. Because the lake was extremely deep, the pressure at the bottom kept the gas trapped inside the water, much like the carbonation inside a sealed bottle of soda. Year after year, more gas accumulated. Eventually, the bottom layer of Lake Nyos became something like an enormous pressurized container filled with carbon dioxide. The water above it acted like a lid, keeping the gas locked in place, as long as nothing disturbed the lake. The system remained stable, but stability does not last forever. On the evening of August 21st, villagers were going about their normal routines. Families were cooking dinner, tending livestock, or preparing children for bed. Lamps flickered inside mud brick homes as people finished their daily chores. No one noticed anything unusual at first. Sometime late in the evening, something disturbed the deep layers of Lake Nyos. Scientists still debate what exactly caused it. It might have been a landslide falling into the water, a sudden cooling from heavy rainfall, or a small shift beneath the lake bed. Whatever the trigger was, it forced some of the deep water upward. As that water rose, the pressure around it suddenly decreased. When pressure drops, dissolved gases escape from liquids, the same way bubbles explode out when you open a shaken soda bottle. Inside Lake Nyos, that reaction became uncontrollable. Carbon dioxide began bursting out of the water in enormous quantities. The gas rising through the lake pulled more deep water upward, which released even more gas. Within moments, the entire lower layer of the lake began erupting. A gigantic column of water shot into the air, forming a fountain that may have reached hundreds of feet high. Waves smashed against the shoreline as the surface of the lake churned violently. But the most dangerous part wasn't the water, it was the gas. Hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon dioxide suddenly escaped from the lake. Unlike many gases, carbon dioxide is heavier than normal air. Instead of rising into the sky, it sinks downward and spreads across the ground like a slow, invisible flood. A massive cloud of the gas poured over the rim of the crater and spilled into the valleys below. Silent, colorless, impossible to see as it moved downhill. The cloud filled low areas first: roads, fields, houses, and animal pens. The gas flowed through the valleys exactly the way water would, spreading outward and sinking into every hollow in the landscape. People had no warning. Carbon dioxide does not smell, and it does not cause pain when inhaled. Instead, it replaces oxygen in the air. When the oxygen level drops too low, the brain shuts down within seconds. Many villagers simply fell asleep and never woke up. Others, who woke during the night, felt sudden dizziness and confusion. Some tried to run outside, not realizing the dangers surrounding them, but running made the situation worse. Rapid breathing meant they inhaled the gas even faster. Entire families were found lying in their homes the next morning. Livestock suffered the same fate. Hundreds of cattle collapsed in the fields, and wild animals throughout the valley died where they stood. The gas cloud spread across many miles of terrain before finally thinning out enough to become harmless again. When daylight arrived, the survivors who were still alive could hardly understand what had happened. Some people had been spared simply because they were sleeping on higher ground. Others survived because they happened to be on hillsides where the heavy gas could not reach. In some buildings, people upstairs survived while those on lower floors died below them. The difference between life and death sometimes came down to just a few meters of elevation. Rescue workers arriving later found entire villages eerily silent. There were no signs of fire, fighting, or destruction. Only people and animals lying motionless across the landscape. In total, around 1,746 people lost their lives that night, along with thousands of animals. Scientists later studied the disaster and confirmed that it was a rare event known as a limnic eruption, a sudden release of gas trapped in deep lake water. Lake Nyos had essentially behaved like a giant bottle of shaken soda, releasing decades of trapped gas all at once. After the tragedy, engineers installed special pipes in the lake to slowly release carbon dioxide from the deep water before it can build up again. These degassing systems allow the gas to escape gradually and safely, preventing another catastrophic eruption. Today, Lake Nyos still sits quietly inside its volcanic crater. The surface looks calm and peaceful, reflecting the sky like any ordinary lake. But scientists know that beneath that calm water lies a reminder of how fragile the balance of nature can be. On that night in 1986, the air itself became the disaster, and for the people living in those valleys, the most basic thing humans depend on, the simple act of breathing, suddenly disappeared.